I appreciate the opportunity. Don's sitting in here. I only got 1 minute, I guess, but that's not going to happen. I want to invite Carl Sanders up and Tim McMillan so they can have a chair here along with Ken. Don't be slow. When the committee for this conference asked for me to talk again about Rep Farms, I said, how many times do I have to keep hitting that out to you folks? And I think they're tired of listening to me about what is the cost. And so I said, let's bring some farmers on board. And basically, I decided, okay, this thing's been going on since 2001. I figured I'd get some ones who've been with me since 2001. If they can still handle me that long, I'll be able to handle this session. And then we had one other that, when I went national, that came in 2005. He'll be on the video for us. And so I want to thank each of them for the opportunity to be here. What I'm going to do, I'm going to kind of open a little bit, and before I get into the numbers, I'll be asking each of them kind of give their personal assessment of this whole project that's been going on for over 20 years and how it's been either helping them in their area or also how it helped you peanut farmers when it deals with DC. Before I get started, though, given time framework, I want to first extend my thanks to the Georgia Peanut Commission, the Southern Peanut Farmers Federation, and the National Peanut Board. This whole project I've been working on for 23 years now would not have been possible without their support and seeing the vision of what this will help do. Before we get to me, this article just came out, Ag Web. I don't know how many of you look at Farm Journal's Ag Web article, that it summed up exactly what I've been trying to preach for many years, and also is kind of geared towards, I think, the extension economist in terms of what they are presenting to you farmers out there when it's come time to decide what you want to plant or not. The article was, which budget model is better to calculate break even? When you go to your county meetings, you usually have the cost of production, which is just your true variable cost for that piece of land. In the article, they said, should you be look at the cost of doing business? They talk about being checkbook approach, whatever you write checks for, and that's what I've been using the word as total cash flow. The numbers you get between those two is significantly different, where you need to be looking at your cost of doing business, because cost of doing business is equal to cash flow. And as you see, the one quote on the side in their article said, be sure you know your true cost. And that's where I found over the years, when I do these updates, they start throwing out some numbers. And luckily, I've been able to be educated by a lot of the production extension scientists like Scott Monfort. Back in the early days, it was John Beasley, John Baldwin, and them. Understanding more, because I grew up on a wheat and beef cattle farm a little east of where Congressman Lucas grew up, and so I knew that stuff in the back of my hand. Getting to the peanut world in the South is a different agriculture, totally different. And also when I talk to my cousins up in Iowa, it's totally different than doing corn, soybeans up there in the Midwest. We started this whole rep thing in 2001. I kind of convinced the Georgia bunch that we need to do the Southeast, because I knew the program was going to change in 2002. So we did it. In that program, Bob Redding took the information when I showed a little bit on payment limitations, needs separate. He said, how soon can you get me an official copy of it for Congressman Combest, who was the chair of the conference committee. After that, they saw the value, and we went to national. So we did updates every 4 years. 2021 was my last one that's going to be used as the basis for our discussion. And the question is whether I'm still around or can they convince me to do a 2025 update. You can see. It's out for questions. This kind of shows when I did my rep farms, which is patterned like Texas A&M, and they worked with me back in the beginning to help make sure I get the methodology right. I made sure, though, that I had it representing all the peanut sectors in the United States. Currently, the only one I don't have with new area will be the area up in this part of northeast Arkansas and southeast Missouri. And they're new, and it takes a few years to get settled down, and I'm hoping we can include them in there so that we will be representing every farmer. But today, I'm just going to focus on the 14 rep farms in the Southeastern Peanut Farmers Federation District. And you can kind of see each of these kind of where they're located geographically. I looked at production areas to make sure I represent the total area. So basically now I'm going to move to the panel I had was Mr. Carl Sanders from Alabama, Mr. Ken Barton from Florida, Mr. Tim McMillan from Georgia, and Mr. Dan Ward from North Carolina. The last two, I won some money on some bets, Tim. And I almost got the bets with Dan Ward, but didn't quite. I got part of it, not completely. So we're going to start off with, let Carl, if you want to give your 2 cents. Appreciate it. Yes, you can use that.
Is this one on?
Not yet.
Ken said I didn't know anything about machinery. He's very correct. I have been a member of the representative farm, one of the representative farms in Alabama since it started. And it's one of those jobs that every 3 or 4 years, 5 years, hold it up close, she says. Okay. Now can you hear me? I am one of the members of the Alabama Representative Farms, and it's one of those things that every 3 or 4 or 5 years you think you don't have the time to participate in, but it's very necessary. We have to get these numbers. We've got friends like Mr. Lucas and some other people on the Ag Committee that they understand, but they have to have numbers to give to their friends to try to get some more votes. So if we don't have good numbers, they don't have anything to back up asking for that reference price increase. And it's getting harder every year. I like Stanley's approach on the whole farm because there's bills have to be paid, the checkbook approach. When the power bill comes in, you've got to pay the power bill. I don't care what's coming in next week, you got to pay that this week. And we just have we have to have cash flow. I use the example, you have to go buy groceries every week. And the money's got to come from somewhere, and it's a cost. Everything's a cost.
True.
I kind of want to repeat what Stanley and Carl has said, and I got a little thing here prepared that I wanted to kind of read. My brother Steve and I own and operate Southern Grace Farms in south central Georgia. We grow the traditional row crops, peanuts, cotton, and some years corn. We also have timber, 60 head of mama cows. We have a U-pick and a we-pick fruit operation and a country store. We grow blackberries and citrus and grapes and ship them up and down the East Coast. We also own and operate berry and peanut company at Buying Point 4 miles south of Enigma, Georgia. We are a true family farm. Steve and I are the 7th generation to farm, and we have 3 of our children who, after college, have returned to the farm. Our hope is that 8th generation will be able to continue to make a living on our farm. However, farmers in our area are in survival mode due to inflated production cost and low prices. I have a 26-year-old son who is married and just had a baby. His wife just had a baby, and I know he's struggling right now with whether he thinks he can stay on the farm or not, or at his age does he need to go find something else to do. It's been my pleasure to work with Dr. Stanley, Stanley Fletcher and other farmers to help develop the representative farms. These farms represent true farm numbers from actual farms. They are not numbers pulled out of the air or a guess on what they should be. They are not numbers, they are real numbers from real farmers. This gives these representative farms validity when using them by our peanut leadership on Capitol Hill to show the cost of producing an acre of peanuts. I believe these representative farms have been a huge asset in maintaining and improving the peanut portion of the last several farm bills. It also gives other farmers something to compare their farm to. But because of the economic condition of farming, it is more important now than ever to know what the real cost of running our business is. Most budgets in the ag industry focus on the cost of production. Although knowing the cost of production is important, it is only part of what we need to know. We must look at the total cost of doing business. Something has to pay for all the checks written and the debits sustained in any given crop year. The cost of production is not only expenses incurred to grow the crop. The cost of doing business, on the other hand, is the cost of production plus all the other checks written. It includes such things as taxes, insurance, debt service, utilities, accounting, and the owner's draw for a cost of living. All of these things beyond the cost of production have to be paid. Working with Dr. Stanley, developing our representative farms helped me to better understand the importance of including everything to get to the real cost of doing business. I will conclude my remarks by saying that having an accurate cost analysis can sometimes take years to perfect. When we first started farming, about 40 years ago now, if we paid out, we thought we'd had a good year. We had no idea which crops were making money, which crops were losing money. We had lived another year and paid out, and we knew we could go again. That has evolved into an intensive scrutiny of each check written and to which crop it should be charged to. Sometimes the expense is divided to several crops. However, this takes time and effort by the management and the employees to do this. For example, at the end of our day on the farm, our employees specify on their time cards how many hours of the day were spent in each crop or enterprise. That part of the labor is then charged to that crop. This is just one example of how we're trying to have accurate numbers to determine our cost of doing business. If we're going to stay on the farm, we must not only know the cost of production, but we got to know the cost of doing business. Thank you.
My name's Ken Barton. I'm the Executive Director of the Florida Peanut Producers Association, but I'm here sitting on this panel today as a diversified row crop farmer from Holmes County, Florida. That's in the Central Panhandle. I've worked with Dr. Fletcher many times as just an observer in the room while gathering the data on the representative farms, but then on several occasions as an active participant and a member of that representative farm that we're working on. I think Carl and Tim have summed up the program really well as its tremendous value to our congressional delegation as they consider ag policy in Washington and writing a farm bill. But let me tell you something about opening your eyes on your personal farm, as Tim mentioned. He alluded to the fact that it takes in the whole farm, all the revenue, the expenses. And until you sit down and go through a program like Dr. Fletcher's Representative Farms, you may not be aware of just what you're spending. You see that bottom line in that expense column, but you may not be really understanding where all those expenses are going. And I'd just like to encourage every one of you as a farmer, if Dr. Fletcher or a representative from your state grower organization calls on you to be a participant in this representative farm, to gather that data, do everything in your power that you can to join that team and provide that information to Dr. Fletcher so he can perfect these models and put together the data that we need in so many areas, not just legislatively, but so he can tell us the health of our farms. So Dr. Fletcher, we appreciate what you do, and I think our attendees will find this an eye-opening experience again.
Thank you,
Thank
guys. The last one is going to be Dan Ward. It'll be video. I did have him where he at the USA Peanut Congress, he was going to come to it. When he got back, he was informed by his executive director that they had a board meeting today and also chaired the nominating committee. So he at least, said he would do a video for us because been with Dan since 2005. And I thought it'd be good to get a perspective from somebody outside this region. And so. I was afraid of that. There.
Hello, everyone.
There.
I am Dan Ward from North Carolina. I am sorry I can't attend in person today, but I have a North Carolina Peanut Growers Association meeting, and I really need to be there. I trust you are having an excellent conference and have enjoyed Savannah. I have participated with Stanley many times over the years with the Representative Peanut Farm Program. We established a farm for southeastern North Carolina and have updated it regularly over the years, just as many of you have. One of the great benefits to me has been getting together with friends and neighbors in my area and discussing real costs associated with our farming operations. We have many multi-generational farms here, and we use it as a teaching tool for the younger farmers, as well as extension personnel and our state executives. Our whole farm profitability analysis helps us as we make decisions that affect how we provide for our families. My regular enterprise budget doesn't always cover whole farm costs as good as the work we do with Stanley. I have used the results of our work with the representative peanut farms in discussions with my congressmen and senators as I serve on their agricultural advisory committees. I can present facts and realistic numbers when I get questions about legislation and farm bills as to how it will affect farmers in my region as well as farmers in all of our peanut growing areas. The argument is much stronger when you have results from many areas of the country, as we have to compete for every dollar in our farm programs. I also serve on the Sustainability Committee of the American Peanut Council. One of the pillars of our program is economic sustainability. I have conversations with people that don't understand agriculture the same way that you and I do. It is always a good idea to have tools for every job, and I look at the representative peanut farm as a tool I can use to get my message across to non-farm friends and acquaintances of the struggles we face every day. As our profit levels shrink due to inflation, supply chain issues, and competition from all over the world, we must use every resource available if we are to continue providing food and fiber for our country. I hope you all gather information today that helps you in your farming operations at home. Stanley has done a great job allowing all of us to share our true cost of production, and I enjoyed the challenges he provides us to reach out and work with other growers. This has been a tremendous experience for me, getting to work with Carl, Tim, Ken, and Stanley on this project, as I have the utmost respect for each one of these gentlemen. I hope you glean information that is helpful to you with this updated farm, and I wish everyone a successful crop year. Thank you.
Okay. These farmers, when I start out, I'd say over 90% of them have stayed with this program since its inception. That's over 90% of them. In the last two updates, 2017, 2021, had to be done in the summer. Knowing how busy you guys are in the summer, they were willing to take the time off to spend at least 3 hours minimum to get updated numbers so we can have as close to accurate as the financial situation is on a peanut farm in the United States. Also, these 4 folks last week spent another almost 2 hours just focusing on the cost of doing business and the peanut farm cost. We did it by conference call since they know me very well. They were used to that pattern, and they wanted me to moderate it, so we went through it, and that's what we're going to do to give an update on what came out of this as to what it is costing in 2024 for you peanut farmers. I need to first preface is that I'll be showing the numbers for 2021. Then my group projected what it would be for 24. We follow the same process that USDA does and other organizations where they take the inflation that FAPRI out of University of Missouri, they take their numbers as to what the inflation cost increase each year by item, which is a national number. And that's where you're going to see on this that, as I found back in 2005 and 6, national numbers do not totally reflect the South. So that's where, but when we got started though, we worked up what is this farm, the average farm in the Southern Peanut Farmers Federation, which would be Georgia, Florida, Alabama, and Mississippi. Basically, this farm was about 2,300 acres, with about almost 2,000 acres was row crop, 85% of it. They had 5% pasture, and 10% was other land. That'd be kind of your trees, some kind of swampy type land, stuff of that nature. So that's where, when we worked out these costs, this is the farm size we're talking about. And it's interesting, this farm size pretty well hits most everybody. It's kind of that good average size. And if many of you attended the prayer breakfast and heard Congressman Austin Scott with that 500,000 gross revenue, I started calculating, and they're in the 7% that are making profit based on the Secretary of Agriculture, Vilsack's testimony. These farms fit. I just didn't realize you guys were in that top 7%. And either you guys been kidding me about the cost or whatever. So anyway, that's the size that we were looking at. And the further mix was this farm, it was 41% was owned, 59% was rented, and 57% was irrigated, and 43% is dry land. Some of these individual ones who served on at this time, their irrigation and dry land may be totally different, but this is kind of what was the average across all 14 farms in the Southeast. We had in there 35% of the land was being grown peanuts, 51% was cotton, 10% was corn, and the rest of it, like soybeans, wheat, other maybe some vegetables and stuff, was 3.2%. This was the structure of the farm. In 2021, when we did the update, the interest rate operating for land was 5.24. When we got the 4 folks together, they kind of came to consensus that they figured it's about 6.62 now. We didn't mess with the equipment because that would take another hour or two, so we're not changing that. But the operating capital was 4.9%, so when you go to the bank in the spring to get your operating capital, it was 4.9, and this year they figured it's about 8.5. So those are the numbers that goes on. I didn't mean to do that there. I was hitting the wrong thing. Okay, this is where we get the cost of doing business. And what I'd like, as I'm going through those, if some of you want to pipe in about how you saw some of these changes, please take it and make a comment then. Basically, what I call quasi, that's where it's everything outside that tract of land. It's your cost of doing business. That's your real estate taxes, personal property taxes, accounting, legal fees. The repairs and maintenance was a big item that had really, escalated from $130-some an acre to $180. That surprised me. When I was talking to Congressman Austin Scott's, staffer, she was totally shocked, and he was too, later saying $180 an acre for repairs and maintenance. And one of them I heard say they had to go to the John Deere dealership to pick up a part, and it was just like sticker shock going on. And then liability insurance, that's a big one that covers everything. Any liability, from your equipment, that where you be traveling down the road if there's an accident, your pickups, your trucks, and just your land where if somebody illegally goes on the land and gets hurt and they try to sue you, you're protected. And that's, when I think back 60 years ago when I was a little kid on our farm, most of this stuff, you didn't really have any cost. Definitely not repairs and maintenance. And insurance, what was insurance, growing up? That's why now you got to cover these things if you're going to farm. Any comments from you about those numbers or anything? Nope. Quiet. But you can see how we projected using inflation indexes what we thought it might be, but when it came down to actually what it was in our region, we way underestimated on some things, especially the repairs and maintenance and supplies. And of course, liability insurance. Those were some of the big ones that changed. The other parts on the, what I call the quasi, and it's a variable because you've got to get money to cover all that, is your truck fuel and lube, your phone, utilities, DTN, internet, those apps like control, if you got irrigation, it's really skyrocketed up the cost to have this. Labor costs have gone up again some more because this one, average farm had 3 full-time employees and some part-time. And then you got the land rent showed the national, I guess that's coming from, they were using more of the Illinois, the corn states where their rents have gone up really high, is when we got it back down to our, region. And this is where basically the rent for like dry land would be $100, $150. The irrigated would be $300, so you do the weighting average across every acre. We just add up the total land rent they're having to pay. And the same thing for interest. So what we do on these costs, we add up what's the total cost you had to write a check for that stuff. We add it up, then we divide it by the row crop, which was about 2,000 acres. So that way, every crop they grew, the peanuts, cotton, corn, wheat, soybeans, they all got the same shares, the same equal shares. We did not prorate it out as to one that spent more time than the other. But the thing comes, and then also you got the interest rates that you got to pay for that money because you're borrowing on that money too. It's all part of your operating. The total cost has increased from $416 in 2021 when I did it to $560.23 for 24 for the Southeast. That's a huge increase. So now we go over to the variable, which is what you usually will see when the extension provides you, little budgets on their websites. We came up and they said, well, back in 2021, the average yield for the Southeast was 48.20 pounds per acre. And we held that constant for 24 when we did our projections. But the group felt like it should be about another 15 pounds more, so it's 48.35. Seed, when you take the national that had technology in there, it jacked that up way higher than what it is for peanuts, but we still had a slight increase. Fertilizer had a slight increase. Your micronutrients, your P and K, went up not as high as what we had projected. And then, of course, I added snake oil, and when I did the updates a few years back, I said, well, how much snake oil? And the farmers kind of looked at me and said, what do you know about that? And I said, I grew up in Oklahoma. We see those signs where you had the guys with the wagon going around trying to sell you something that's going to help you feel better. And I know, talking to Scott Monfort and stuff, those are not extension proven to show that it can. But the farmer's so concerned about trying to, if there's a chance they can increase that yield a little bit, they're going to try it. So we have a little bit there. And of course, then your lime and gypsum, didn't feel like it's increased significantly from 21. And then you got the inoculants, the herbicides, the insecticides, the fungicides, growth regulators, and cover crops is one. Back when we first started, when they just put a burn down, that's all it was. And finally I asked them, I said, well, if it's a cover crop, did you have to buy the seed? Did you have to prepare the soil? And then find out sometimes they'll spray for some weeds in the middle before they do the burn down at the end. And I said, where's those costs at? And they'd be sitting there scratching their head and they say, I guess we don't have it in there. And it's like back earlier on the herbicides. You see, I got chemical and labor. When pigweed came out, I said, oh, we just had about maybe $50, $45 for for herbicides. And I said, do you got pigweed problem? They said, oh, God dang, we do. Because I remember hearing about some guys that were having to pay over $100 an acre for just manual labor to get rid of it. And they said, yeah, we got that. And I said, herbicide is weed control. That gets chemicals and manual. And they said, oh, yeah, we need to count that in there. If I'm wrong, guys, you correct me. Raise your hand on there. And, of course, deer and wild hog control. We didn't make a change. They didn't feel like making a change. It's a cost to them. In custom application, the consultants, and then they felt like the irrigation and the tractor combine fuel combined was about $100 an acre what they were spending, and so I kind of prorated it out on that part. And then we got the drying, where I guess is lower than what our 21. Some areas might need to do more drying than others, and so with this group here, kind of felt like it wasn't quite. We took the percentage of the crop that was going to be dried times that 48, 30 pounds to come up with what the drying cost would be. And the same thing with cleaning, did the same thing. It's definitely lower. So I guess these guys felt like, the farmers are getting better at delivering cleaner peanuts, so you didn't have to clean every, ton. Most of them don't have charge for hauling, but there's a few that have to pay for some hauling. That's why it's so low. Then you got your checkoff. Crop insurance has increased significantly. Now, when I'm talking to them, you just don't get the revenue protection or yield protection. You need to get wind, hail, hurricane, all these others. You got to have all that tied in. And so you're talking about $45 an acre. Then interest on operating capital. So basically, in 21, we had about $692 cost per acre. It went up to $815 per acre based on the consensus getting the farmers together. Any comments about that part? Okay. Okay, here's the last slide where we took those two, and where the total variable cost is $13.75. And I consider cost of doing business and the traditional variable cost that you see on that acre of land, that's all. You have to go get money to cover all that. So I consider that variable cost. Then I had the land payments and the loan payment for equipment for a total cash flow of $1,623 an acre per acre to grow an acre of peanuts. That's around a $300 an acre increase. So when you put it on a per ton basis with that yields, in 2021 it was $551 a ton, which was above your $535. When we did our projection using those inflation indexes, like what the other government agencies and everybody else does it was $724, almost $725 a ton. When we took their consensus, it was $6.71 a ton to grow. And so when I look at those numbers, when I go back up and take just what I consider the true variable cost doing business, it was $568, $569 a ton to just be able to pay back the bankers. And it didn't include grocery. I'm not including grocery in there. You're working for free on there, and you have enough peanuts that you kind of just eat a few every day to keep you going. Hopefully that the next crop will be better. The loan payments that everybody has comes out to be around a little more than about $102 an acre that's costing you. So basically, if you say, well, I own all my land, I'm not worried about the opportunity cost, I got my old equipment, I'll just sit there and work on each day, you still need a $569, almost $570 peanut price just to break even with your cost. And this is the thing that I wish I had answers for, but this is where, to me, these farmers are not lying to me. Not sitting there for 3 hours. You can break them down by then about it. So I don't have an answer, but this is kind of what the process is, and it's not pretty out there. And I know it's not, as you heard, Lucas and Bob talk about this fall. These bankers and stuff, it can be we could be repeating 1980 down here. In the 80s, my family got hit and my cousins got hit up in Iowa. We didn't get hit really down here because we had the peanut quota program that kind of kept you alive. We don't have that anymore, so we could be on the road of the 80s. Don't want to see that. That's something nobody wants to see. But that's where the manufacturers and stuff, which the shellers have to depend on the manufacturers for what price they can offer you, don't think they can find enough, I hate to use the word suckers, that will produce the peanuts at that $400, $450 a ton. Because I believe that's what you're going to see. If you don't have a contract, I think if you get a 400, you count your blessings. Okay, you guys get to have the last closing comments.
I know these costs seem high, but they're there. And we have to be very careful not to farm up our equity. And I don't know the answer, but I know there's not a whole lot of profit left out there.
Yeah, I just kind of want to repeat what Carl said. These numbers are not inflated. We sit down, we don't say, okay, we think it's this, let's add another 10% just to be safe. In fact, I'm concerned that we may be missing some expense that we hadn't thought about, Stanley. I'm more concerned that we're actually not high enough but I wanted to assure you these numbers are not inflated. We're not trying to make them look like this. I really wish they looked, we're different than this.
I agree with Carl and Tim, and there's one thing that's very evident in the numbers that have been produced here today from the representative farm, from the update from 21 to 24. You see the tremendous increase. And I know this may be a pretty bold statement, but I think production costs on our farms are just escalating out of control. And I believe that the majority of the farmers in here would agree with me.
Well, I guess I just want to thank the group that participated and joined me for one more time, and that I hope folks out here, gain a little bit more understanding as they're looking at their situation, because like Mr. Sanders says, you do not want to farm up your equity where you have nothing, because your equity is your 401k. If if you hope to retire and have something to live on. That's critical. I don't have the answers. That's where you got to participate and with your grower organizations and talk to your congressmen and senators and wish the best this year. I hope this crop turns out great for you. And thank you for everybody. Thank you guys for willing to participate. I appreciate it. Couldn't have been done without you. That concludes my part.